Good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for turning up. I guess what's great about tonight is community energy was something completely new to me. Does anybody remember when Nikki Ison turned up to speak to us in the Telstra building? Was anybody else in this room here? Maybe. Yes, one over there. So that was about 5 years ago. And
Probably 6, I reckon.
Yes. And so like community energy was a new thing. So what's this idea? And now we kind of take it for granted that we've got a whole bunch of community energy groups across Australia pushing their towns, pushing their councils, and creating a market for what has been called prosumers. So I'm not going to talk a lot about Pingala because Tom's going to explain who they are and what they've been up to in the last couple of years. But to ask you to understand that what we've been doing, in a sense almost isolated in our homes with solar PV, the potential now to move out across the landscape through community energy groups offers also a level of social equity that we haven't seen before, and I think that's really important to consider. So looking forward to what Tom's going to tell us about where Pingala's at right now and what they're looking to become. The other thing, this is our last sort of meeting for this year. We will have some kind of Christmas get-together. In the next couple of days, we'll be sending out an invitation to our AGM as well. I will be stepping down as a convener next year. I'm actually going to leave Sydney for a couple of years, so I'd like to thank everybody who supported the branch, our committee, and also the people who made it along to our event last week as well. We've seen a fantastic renew, so to speak, of the ATA over the last 2 years, and I hope we can get some more support in the committee over the coming years. So thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, David. Where are you moving to?
I've got a plan to do the core around Mount Kailash, if people are familiar with that. It's the mountain in the middle of the Tibetan plateau.
Wow.
And as people might know, I had a pretty significant surgery last year, so the cardiologist has given me 30 years, so I've got to get out there and take advantage of them.
Okay, awesome. How long am I talking for?
You've got sort of 45 minutes to talk.
Oh, really?
An extra 15 minutes for questions. So
I was thinking more like 30 minutes. But,
that's fine.
I can make it last.
Don't
45. So thanks everybody. This is going to be a bit of a low energy run through. I'm not feeling the best health this afternoon. I've come down with a bit of a headache, and overdoing things has really caught up with me, I think. So it's going to be quite a conversational run through, but nonetheless, I think you'll find it's a really interesting story. What I'm going to talk you through is, first of all, explain who Pingala is, because some of you might not have ever heard of us, why we exist, and even if you had heard of us, it's really important to keep on reiterating the fundamental reason why it is that we do what we do. So I'll talk a little bit about that, and tell a little bit of the history and the story. And then what I'm going to really focus on is what we've been doing over the last 12 to 18 months. We've effectively dramatically raised our ambitions and taken on a number of new initiatives. And we're now at a point where we're at a bit of a crossroads. So I'm going to explain what we've been doing. But this is almost a bit of an end of year recap for us, and I know you're not sort of engaged Pingala people, but nonetheless, it's a really important message. And so, for that reason, that's why I'm recording this little speech on my amazing technology here, my iPhone and my recorder. But a little bit about me. I've been with Pingala since the beginning, and I'll tell you the beginning story in just a minute. I'm the secretary of Pingala, and I'm also the secretary of both organisations that make up Pingala. I'm part of the team at Community Power Agency, so I'm really lucky to work with the founders of Community Power Agency, Nikki Ison, you just mentioned, David, and Jarrah Hicks, as well as Francesca May, and more recently Elizabeth Noble, the team that really supports communities around the country that are doing citizen-led energy projects like Pingala is doing. And what I've really focused my efforts on as part of the Community Power Agency team is being an expert in the different business models finances and the legal structures that are being adopted and adapted by all of those community energy groups that are out there. And there's now over 100 of those groups spread across the country. So Pingala is the Sydney-based group. We're not the only group based in Sydney, but we did start up in March in 2013. And our foundation story is pretty simple. 20 people came together with a shared appreciation that there was something fundamentally wrong with the way we make energy, as well as a, again, shared vision that if we worked together collaboratively, we could actually do something meaningful about solving the energy problem that we're in. So we've been really lucky over our 5.5, almost 6-year journey that we've had a very large core group of volunteers. We started with 20, we went up to 40 at one point in time. These days we're down to about 15, and I'm expecting that at the moment we're going to probably see ourselves swell back up again soon, just because of how much activity we've been undertaking recently. So our purpose is fairer energy, and I just spoke to why we do it. But the best way I know how to explain why Pingala does what we do is to tell the story of where our energy currently comes from. It's not excuse the Australian ibis landing on the roof, they're pretty graceful creatures. It's not a very long story, but the story starts with an awful black hole in the ground. I know the image isn't fantastic here this evening, but that's a photo of an open-cut coal mine in the Hunter Valley, and it's a pretty unbelievable image. We dig up coal, we truck and train it to a nearby power station, we burn it to make electricity, and then we transmit it to our towns and cities, where we get to enjoy the benefits of that electricity. And it's hugely beneficial. Electricity makes our modern lives possible in so many ways. But unfortunately, what's happening is there's a big disconnect between us enjoying that wonderful electricity and those communities up there who are having to deal with the negative impacts of the way we're making energy. There's obvious impacts like the environmental destruction, which is complete. Look at that. The entire landscape has been completely turned over. It also, and the thing that really concerns me the most for local communities, is the health impacts are now becoming really well known. And those communities are really underneath a massive burden of having to deal with diminished health outcomes because of the mining and because of the burning of coal in coal-fired power stations. Not to mention contribution to climate change and a bunch of other negative impacts. Now, we do acknowledge there are positive aspects, and jobs is the most obvious one, but the reality is that the jobs are actually massively overstated. There's less jobs in coal mining and burning coal to make electricity than most people think. So that's kind of the basis of the problem. But then if we think about who owns this system, who actually profits from the way that the energy is being made, usually it's going to be shareholders in a distant stock exchange. In Sydney, here, if you're lucky, but quite likely they're going to be overseas in Singapore, perhaps New York or something. So this three-way disconnect between who's benefiting from the profit, who's benefiting from the product, and who's bearing the negative impact. So we're fundamentally about creating fairer energy, and we think the best way to do that is to bring people closer together. And so that's why we started up, and that's our sort of purpose as an organisation summed up. So these days we deliver, well, we've got programs of work covering 3 main areas, helping businesses access clean energy and lower their energy costs. Many of you will know about Pingala because of the products that we've developed for businesses. We've this year expanded out into helping homes get access to clean energy, as well as we've actually already always done work in support of communities and needs. So it's more like our charitable work over in the communities section. So I'm going to cover off on the work that we've been doing in all of these spaces. And let's start with the first one. So, who's already heard of Pingala and who's aware of the project that we did at Young Henry's? Okay. So when we started out, we got together and we said, look, we want to make fair energy. What we actually want to do is to become a major energy company that's owned and operated and driven by local communities, because local communities, they're going to deliver fairness to themselves, of course. They're not going to poison themselves. They're not going to rip themselves off. But that's a pretty lofty ambition, and so we needed to start with something fairly straightforward. And so we looked around and we decided probably the sensible thing to do was to just copy what some other more pioneering community energy groups have done. And the groups that really inspired us the most was Repower Shoalhaven down the coast, and Clear Sky Solar Investments. And what they have done is they've developed a way for local people to invest in solar on the roof of a local business. So if a business can't afford to install solar panels, they've got some pretty stark choices. They can borrow money off a bank, they can run the gauntlet and try and negotiate a reasonable price on a power purchase agreement from a solar company. And this is a new product. It's really community financing. So the funds to pay for this solar on the roof of the local business comes from the local community. So we took that idea, we made it our own, we really fitted our values to it, and our values are really summed up by the simple phrase, fairer energy. And we didn't think it was quite right to have a model like Clear Sky had and like Repower Shoalhaven had that was restricted to just 20 investors per project. Because what that means is if you're installing 100 kilowatts on the roof of a business and it costs $160,000, you've got to have an average investment size of $160,000 divided by 20. And that locks a lot of people out, a lot of lower income people who would love the opportunity to invest in clean energy. They're not able to participate in those projects so easily. So we looked around and we decided the best thing to do was to form a cooperative. And what a cooperative allows us to do is to offer an unlimited number of investors in each one of these projects. So Young Henry's was our first project. It was only a very small system, 30 kilowatts. We knew that there were going to be way more people wanting to invest in that project than there was investments available. And so what we did is we offered people little packets of $250 worth of shares. And people put in what we called expressions of interest to buy shares. And those expressions of interest went into a beer barrel on the day. And we drew out the names until we'd raised enough money. And so we raised $17,500 in 9 minutes on that day using a crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding mechanism. A couple of things about that are sort of interesting is we did crowdsource equity funding before the legislation was passed. And the reason why we were able to do that was because we're a cooperative, not a company. So we're governed by a different set of laws to the Corporations Act. Second thing is, some people might say that it's not crowdfunding because we didn't use a web platform. No, that's true, we didn't use a web platform. We used an actual real crowd, and they all came together, and we raised the money off them. So we definitely did do crowdfunding, and it was equity crowdfunding. We recently did our second project, and the second project was on the roof of the Four Pines Brewery. So we're starting to worry that we might have a drinking problem, but we are also planning on doing a project soon with the Sydney Buddhist Centre, so something will be fine with our souls after that one. Or we'll at least be at ease with ourselves. So it took us about 3.5 years to develop that product. It was quite a long and drawn-out process. And the reason for that is partly because we took a fairly slow road. We took the time to build our supporter base, to get the message out there, to talk about why it is what we were doing, to listen to the communities that make up Sydney. Part of the reason why it took us 3.5 years is because it just is a little bit of a complicated thing to do, to create a new investment vehicle, to navigate that regulatory space of the heavily regulated finance industry and the heavily regulated energy industry, and that's where we're operating. But there is an adage that I often refer to, which is that if you can either go quickly on your own, or you can go a long distance if you take people with you. And right now it really feels like we've taken people with us, and we've got a long way to go on this journey yet. So we've got a really solid foundation and a solid base. We came off the back of finishing the Young Henrys project at the end of 2016, and through the beginning of 2017, we really took stock and had a look around us and what we've done. And we realised that by one measure, we actually hadn't achieved a lot. We'd installed 30 kilowatts of solar. That's not really very much for being around for 3-4 years. But we also realised that by another measure, we'd actually achieved an awful lot. We've realised that what we've got is this amazing brand, profile and reputation. Barely a week goes by that we're not contacted by another community energy group or a council somewhere in Australia who wants to talk to us about what it is that we've done and how it is that we've achieved what we've achieved. We're one of the most recognised brands in the community energy sector, which is remarkable to us because, again, we've only done that one small project, or we, until recently, had only done that one small project. And so what we really came to a decision about was that what was important to us was to do justice to that brand and profile and reputation, and not be satisfied with just dribbling on along and doing a few more of those community investment projects on the roofs of local businesses. So what I want to talk about now is what has been our version of doing justice to that, and that's really what have we been doing in 2017 for the last 12 to 18 months. So this slide really draws out the 5 initiatives that we have underway. The first of those initiatives is installing solar on the roofs of businesses where it's financed by the local community. Of course, you know, we're not going to stop doing that because that took us so long to develop that product. It's there, it's ready to go. And so we have been continuing to go out there and find new businesses. That's why we've got the Young Henrys, the Four Pines project completed. That's why we've got the Sydney Buddhist Centre coming up. And that's why we've got a couple of other projects in the pipeline that we'll probably be doing early in the new year. So the second one of those says for houses, and really what that's referring to is taking advantage of the fact that there are now, it's become a lot easier to do solar and battery bulk buys. So solar bulk buys are really the original form of community energy in Australia. It's really hard to trace any stories back earlier than when community members started coming together to use their collective buying power to get a better price and a better deal on buying expensive solar panels. And we kind of realised that they were going through a bit of a resurgence because of batteries coming into the frame. Also just because solar hasn't lost popularity. So bulk buys have never gone away, but they were going through a bit of a resurgence. So I'll talk more about what we've done with the bulk buy. The third one is, says for everyone, and that's about creating what are known as solar gardens. So unfortunately not everybody has a sunny roof above their heads. Here in the inner suburbs, loads of households are apartment dwellers, they're renters, and there's tons of reasons why households can't put solar on their roofs. So we're really concerned about those households, especially in light of the fact that it's in that group, locked out energy users, that our most low income and vulnerable households sit. So it's a real fairness piece for us, is can we create a way for households to own a share of solar and to get the benefits of that, even if they don't have a sunny roof over their heads, and solar gardens is the answer. The third one there is for good. That's really about continuing to do the work that we've been doing since the early days, partnering with an organisation called the Valley Centre, and that allows us to do work in support of Indigenous communities. So how do remote Indigenous communities who are struggling under the burden of rising energy bills get access to the benefits of solar so they can keep those costs down? And the last one is the most ambitious one of all. It's about taking the concepts and the ideals that we've really built into our organisation as a cooperative and making it easy for other communities to become cooperatives themselves. So I'm going to run through each of these. I'll probably spend a couple of minutes on some of them and maybe more than a couple of minutes on others. And at the end, I'm going to wrap up exactly where we're up to now and what's happening next. Okay? So the first one, community solar bulk buy. So this one came up on us pretty quickly and unexpectedly. We'd always wanted to do a bulk buy, but we kind of put it into the too hard basket. It was something that we never thought that would be a sensible use of our time to tackle. But we had a conversation, well, we were actually sitting in on a meeting when this organisation called Shine Hub gave a presentation about the way that they were doing bulk buys in support of local communities. And we realised that what they were actually doing is they'd created a platform to make it much easier for a community group like ours to run a bulk buy campaign. And so, what have I just done? So, what our role was to partner with Shine Hub and then recruit other community organisations and to really promote the bulk buy across Sydney. It's been a really ambitious program. We're covering all of Greater Metropolitan Sydney. We've run over 30 events. I think it's 34 events, or there will be 34 events by the time we're completed. And the results have been pretty impressive. It's far and away the biggest bulk buy that Sydney's ever seen. We will have over 300 households that are installing solar. 82% of those have got batteries. Now, normally when there's a campaign to do solar, or you look at the statistics from solar companies, the number of households doing solar is usually around about the 25–30% mark. So a really large number of these households are doing batteries. And we think the reason for that is because what Shine Hub are doing is they're inviting people to come along to a no-pressure information evening to fully inform them of what might work for them and their households. So there's a big problem with trust between consumers and the solar salespeople. And there's a big problem with confusion about what solar system or what battery system is going to be appropriate for an individual household, and that's really what Shine Hub have been doing. They've been empowering households to make informed decisions. And the icing on the cake is because of the number of households, they'll be creating the biggest virtual, possibly the first, and certainly the biggest virtual power plant in Sydney involving all of those households. So really giving all those households an opportunity to participate in the other forms of generating income from the batteries that they've installed into their households. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah. We'll do a couple. I know we'll do a bigger question session at the end.
Yeah, I was at the presentation Shine Hub on Miranda.
Yep.
And I was really wanting to get right into it, but I'm currently getting a review of that and working with the community around the areas. And I was going to ask whether there is opportunity to go outside and where.
So the question is, do we operate outside the metropolitan area? So you don't live in metropolitan Sydney, I take it. Where do you live? Wollongong, yeah. Look, the reason for that is because it's because of how closely the solar companies are vetted. And so we had to sort of define a geographic location and then find local solar companies. Also, the solar companies agreed to give really good pricing, and one of the constraints was that they didn't have to travel a long distance to do that install. The hard answer is that we don't plan to run a bulk buy outside of Sydney. But what Shine Hub might do is they might decide to run one down there. But when they do that, they'll partner with a local community group down there, and we won't be involved. Yeah, keep speaking to Shine Hub about that. That's your question.
The problem with China is that they've got quite a limited a few combinations of solar panels, inverters, batteries, and batteries. So unless you want to go with one of those particular options, that may not satisfy every particular client.
Yep. Yeah, so it's not really a question, it's a comment, right? I will respond. The comment is that they only have a limited number of packages in terms of the solar panel, solar size, battery brands, battery size. Did I capture that accurately in the summary? Yeah, I think that's right. You know, it's not perfect. No scheme like that is going to be perfect. What they're navigating is a compromise between having to contact each one of the solar companies individually, because no solar company sells every brand of batteries or every brand of solar panels, and obviously having an unlimited number of options. They can't offer an unlimited number of options, so they've come in somewhere in between. I guess that's really a compromise that they've made.
So I also went to their presentation, and I found the virtual power plant option quite interesting. You might sort of swing it as a positive. I haven't put an order yet.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious about is how the funding that's going to work. I mean, they're still trying out something they've got. In particular, I was aware that Reposit is doing virtual power plants through PowerShop. And when I tried to search online, their webpage said you just get one flat fee that you get paid per year. It varies depending on the size of the battery.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if it's going to really end up being something that's going to be on a kilowatt hour basis, so that if you then have an incentive as an owner, that if you can conserve what you're using, you can actually earn even more money by selling it through the VPP.
Yeah. The question is how does the virtual power plant work?
Yes.
And more detail around the question. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. We haven't been involved in designing it, and it's still under design, the virtual power plant.
But how do you see these things evolving? Do you think it's going to, do you think the technology is improving enough to give extra granularity? I was disappointed when I saw what Reposit was offering.
Yeah, look, how I see this evolving is rapidly, and so I would encourage any household signing up to the virtual power plant to make sure you're not locking yourselves in from some long-term thing. Make sure you're getting what seems like a good deal now, but when a better deal comes along in the future, jump on that one. Yeah.
So can I just add a response to that? GreenSync also has come onto the market recently, and they're going to be a large aggregator. They've GreenSync, and they've signed agreements with Tesla, with Enphase, and a range of other companies. So this space is evolving quite quickly, and we are going through the funnel, so to speak. Reposit definitely holds the mantle when it comes to virtual power plants, particularly in the ACT. But with what's happening in Victoria, where the state government has made a massive kind of, if the Andrews government stays in, a massive commitment to battery storage, and also what's happening in South Australia already. So at the moment we have a whole range of things happening. What we aren't seeing is anything like that in New South Wales. We aren't seeing a large battery installed, and we aren't seeing virtual power plants. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the point. So in a way, these guys are pushing something forward, which we're seeing more commitment to in other states and territories. There was an announcement in Alice Springs today to put in a 5 megawatt battery. So we're just not seeing this in New South Wales to the same scale.
We need to move on. I'm going to place a bookmark right here because I'm going to come back to this question of how do I see it playing out. And it all makes sense when I come to the last initiative that we're working on. So we're going to move on. So, social access solar gardens, or just solar gardens. But the reason I call it social access solar gardens is because we've been participating in a project funded by ARENA. We weren't the project lead organisations, we were just a participant. I'll explain what that means. But what this graph is trying to show is that the most low-income households are really being locked out from being able to participate in owning solar. It's a bit of a weird graph, to be honest, because what it shows you is if you grab all the postcodes with above 30% solar penetration, just those postcodes, not the others, just the ones that have above 30% solar penetration, and then you break them down by the income brackets, 0 to 20%, 20 to 40, and so forth. That's how they land. Okay? There's any number of other ways you could show low-income households, but this is the graph I've got to hand. And what it shows you is that the richest postcodes are actually not that enthusiastic about solar, and that's no surprise because those richer households are going to be less sensitive to the cost of solar, the cost of electricity. Then as you work down the income brackets, solar becomes more and more popular because, as we all know, solar is a great way to keep on top of your rising energy costs and control that. Sadly, however, it's the 0 to 20 bracket who have the least amount of solar, or at least those are the postcodes that have least been able to adopt it. And there's loads of other evidence out there that low-income households really are being locked out from owning solar. So what are we going to do about that? And what this project was about was taking a concept that is already very well developed and it's thriving, booming in the US, which is called a solar garden. So what is a solar garden? A solar garden, I think the clue is in its name. It's meant to invoke a community garden. So if you want to grow vegetables and you don't have a plot of land, because perhaps you live in an apartment, or you don't have a garden that's suitable for that, you can go and join a community garden. You can be assigned an allotment and you can use that plot of land to grow your own vegetables. If you want to make your own solar electricity and you don't have a roof or a sunny roof, you can go and join a solar garden, and the electricity that's produced by your allotted share will be credited on your bill. Pretty simple concept. Unfortunately, there's a number of problems that are preventing it from taking place. In Australia, we have a particular problem, which is the network costs comprise such a huge part of our bills, and we can't avoid paying them. But nonetheless, we felt that the project lead organisations felt that it was worth developing the concept. The hypothesis was that the reason why they weren't emerging spontaneously, solar gardens in Australia, is because they're a more complicated model comprised of more moving parts with more participants. And so if we can just support them with a bit of business design and so forth, maybe we can start to see solar gardens appearing in Australia. Maybe by starting to demonstrate solar gardens, we can start to break down some of the barriers. So that's what the project's all about. These are all the organisations involved. There's Pingala just here. You will notice that community power agencies high up in that list, so full disclosure, actually the project was really led by the Institute for Sustainable Futures and Community Power Agency. And these two organisations went and got funding from ARENA and the New South Wales government, as well as a few other funders. And what the project does is it's trying to help, it's comprised of two halves. The first half is helping these 4 prototype teams, 5, let's call it 5, prototype teams based around a specific geographic location to develop the business model for how they would go about delivering a solar garden, and to support them in doing that with the other half of the project, which is research. So we've been a participant in the Blacktown team, and we've been partnering with PowerShop, Blacktown Council, in that team, and we've had access to the legal research that Norton Rose Fulbright's been doing, the market research that the Institute for Sustainable Futures have been doing, trying to determine whether or not consumers are actually even wanting this type of product, as well as some help from again, the Institute for Sustainable Futures with the financial modelling to see if it stacks up financially. So we are now at the completion. We actually had the final wrap-up workshop on Friday. So we just finished the project. And the outcome of the project was either we're going to have between 1 to 4 pilot projects ready to implement a pilot, underpinned by these business models that they've developed. Or if the teams aren't going to progress to pilot, the barriers are well understood, solutions identified, and we're speaking to policymakers about what it would take to make this really valuable way of solar ownership come into existence in Australia. So where we're up to is we and our team have decided we're going to go ahead. And I'll talk more about how we're going to go about going ahead, but we're going through the process of seeking funding so that we can build a 1 to 2 megawatt solar farm and have 500 to 1,000 households participating in owning an off-site solar array.
We can talk a bit more about that.
Well, I'll talk more about it at the end, but let's do questions after every one of these.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions?
Well, yeah, so for example, when I went to one of the Sharma Brothers, I took a friend along who lived in the hills area.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting except he's living in a house where he's just not viable to invest in solar directly.
Yeah.
And so even then probably the option of where you don't try and pay anything up front wouldn't work either because you're still locked in longer term.
Yeah.
Whereas something like this, if it worked, might be attractive because
Yeah.
that would be portable, it wouldn't be based on your residence.
Correct.
Right? But then when I look at the way you've got it there, does it mean, for example, the Blacktown team, would that be something that anyone in Sydney could join? It's meant to be aimed for Blacktown residents, What do you have in mind?
Well, we're going to deliver a pilot,
Yeah.
and that pilot will be delivering a prototype version of a solar garden. We're not saying it's going to be perfect in every aspect.
Yep.
We'll be getting substantial support from the government to pilot it, and Blacktown Council will play a really valuable role in that. And of course, they want local residents from Blacktown to be involved. We're probably looking at somewhere between 100 and 300 households in Blacktown Council, and we're really keen to quickly replicate it and roll it out. We think it's the inner suburbs of Sydney is where this will gain traction really quickly, because there's loads of households who are actually quite affluent who can't install solar on the roofs in the
Well, I
inner
think if you get it working in Blacktown Council, then you have a model, from what I understand, that is council-based, that you could then knock on the door of literally every council in the Sydney area
Exactly.
and say, hey, this is working in Blacktown. You guys would have to have a few hundred households in your area.
Yeah.
But if you told them this, it's a no-brainer. It works the way you described. We want to give money to a power retailer and pay cheaper and support community solar.
Yep. Question down the back? No? Yep.
With the billing, how does that work? Do you partner with the retailer?
Yeah, so the only way you can provide an on-bill credit like that is to partner with a retailer. And so that's why the project was designed so that each one of those teams had a retailer, a community energy group and a council involved, as well as a social welfare organisation, because it was focusing on low income and vulnerable households.
Do you guys like partner with power as well?
Our intention is to do a pilot with PowerShop. That's exactly what we plan to do. Yep. Our approach with regards to partnerships, how am I doing on time, David? To go. Yep. Our approach with partnerships has been consistent. We always seek to enter into non-exclusive relationships based on respect and trust built over time. So we're communicating really clearly to PowerShop that we want to partner with them to do this pilot and to develop solar gardens into the future, but they're not going to own those customers. We want to bring another retailer in the future, so that if people want to move to another retailer, they can move to another retailer. So we're really just creating a platform to allow solar gardens to happen for multiple retailers. Okay. That raised a few questions, yeah.
What are you said you identified the barriers. What are they?
The barriers?
For solar gardens?
Well, the point here was, if teams are not proceeding to pilot, what are the barriers preventing?
Okay.
But to answer your question, what are the barriers more broadly? Just about the biggest problem is that grid exporting renewables solar projects, they are actually a little bit marginal. And then when you need to deliver that electricity to a household, you actually have to pay the cost of the network charges to do that. And network charges are what, 46% of the typical bill? Something in that range. So almost half of the cost of the bill. So we can produce dirt cheap electricity out of the solar farm. Maybe we can get it down to 7 cents a kilowatt hour, but then we've got to pay 14 cents of network charges, and it kills us. So that's really the problem. But having said that, we do think we can offer bill savings without support. It's just a bit risky. So we're looking for financial support to do the pilot, to take the risk away, and specifically to allow vulnerable low-income households to participate. So let's get them on first. Yeah.
What's the possibility to buy the extra power and bulk buy the extra power?
Is it possible to buy the extra power from a bulk buy?
Well, yeah, is it possible, is it the property, or is it the possibility of the power company to buy the extra power?
The extra power.
Well, if the solar can't provide everybody,
Yeah.
then who buys the extra?
Who supplies the extra? The house, the solar gardens house, isn't it? Well, that'd just be the normal electricity that PowerShop would normally supply to that house. Yeah. What we're trying to do is, and sort of our key design principle is, we're trying to emulate, replicate rooftop solar in a gross metering arrangement. That's we think we can actually achieve that. But of course, as we all know, it's much better if you're behind the meter these days. You get much better value for solar. But that's all right. Those households that literally locked out, they've got a stark choice between nothing or a not as good as rooftop behind the meter solar with solar garden. It's still better than nothing. We'll do quick questions. I'll take the 2 questions and then we'll move on. Yeah, go first.
So for the solar gardens, are they like you rent part of the field somewhere and pick it all?
Where do we put them?
And do you see yourself evolving to be a retailer using a cooperative model?
Look, the future's really uncertain. I don't see ourselves evolving to be a co-op retailer anytime soon, but it does pose an interesting question, and another bookmark on that one, and we'll come to the end. Where do we put them? They can be on a roof or they can be ground mounted. The key attribute about them is they're exporting all their energy to the grid. They're not behind the meter solar. They're new solar installed specifically for those households. And we think it's a really important driver for more renewables being installed out there. That's what we're seeing in the US. Sorry, I need to move on. All right, so I think this is the last one I'm going to cover off. Second last one I'm going to cover off. Local energy co-ops. This is the 5th one in the list. So, a bit hard to explain this one. I'm often not sure where to start. I guess a great place to start is to give our views on the difference between a corporate relationship. The way our energy system currently works is based on a corporate relationship. And what happens in a corporate relationship is you have a supplier who's selling some sort of a product, and they've got their productive asset, whether that's intangible or tangible. But let's imagine it's an electricity company, and they're generating electricity. They own that productive asset, they've got the product, and they sell it to the customer. Now, the customer has no visibility to the productive asset. They can't see how much it costs to make the product. And so the theory goes that the reason why we have low prices is because there's multiple suppliers, each with their productive asset, and they're competing with each other in a competitive marketplace. It's competition, theoretically, that makes sure everything's running efficiently. Problem is we have market failure, and it's seeming to me a lot like there's significant market failures in the energy market. And so what we think might be happening is the suppliers are not being honest about how much it's costing them to produce the energy. They're actually not even delivering us the products we want, let alone at the right price. And they're ripping us off. And we're all getting really dissatisfied with that. Now there's a different model, which is the cooperative relationship. And the way the cooperative relationship works is you have multiple consumers banding together, co-owning the productive asset, co-owning, co-financing, co-operating the productive asset. And the only way these consumers can get a better deal is if the whole system runs more efficiently. So it's not competition that's driving efficiency, it's the raw visibility to the shared productive asset that they're co-owning. So we want to take this idea further, and what we've been working on, there's actually a triangle behind that diagram, but what we've been working on is this concept that we call pre-power co-ops. And what it is effectively, it's like a franchise model for local energy cooperatives. So imagine if you wanted to start up a sandwich shop in your local neighbourhood. You could go and figure out what name you wanted to give your sandwich shop, go and register that name, sort out all your marketing materials, sort out your supply chains, all of your business systems and processes, rent a premises and open up shop and see how your business is going to go. Or you can just become a Subway franchise holder, and it's all a business in a box. Well, now imagine if you really like the idea of the local community owning its own energy assets, owning solar panels on the roofs of households, owning the batteries that are in the garages, not as individuals, but collectively, because there's a whole bunch of benefits to doing these things collectively, and I'm going to come to some of them in a minute. Well, we'll make it as easy as possible for people to start up and to operate that local energy business. It'll be a cooperative. And the way we're able to do that is we're partnering with an organisation called WLPC, and they have an information systems platform. So what we're talking about here is a globally cutting-edge way of organising our data and our information. It's a bit like blockchain, but it's not blockchain. Blockchain has arguably somewhat distributed the ledger and put it into these cryptographically protected locations spread around the internet. This is completely distributing it. So actually your individual customer will have an app on their phone, and that app contains all the information about them. And on that information systems platform, we are building, it enables us to do infrastructure financing in a completely new way. It's not based on equity or debt. What we're going to do is we're going to pre-sell the electricity, and there's a bunch of reasons why that's beneficial. The main headline benefit is that we don't need to maintain a separate system. We don't need to have a separate register of shareholders and how we're going to distribute the value to them. We just need to maintain a sales and order processing system. And on top of that, that creates a bit of a governance challenge. So this is a highly innovative project, and a little bit like what it looks like is this. There's the software services at the bottom, and we've just created pre-power, which is here. We just created pre-power to be the services organisation that really takes this IT platform, packages it up with administrative services, that's the franchise bit, and then services a local energy co-op. We've just created the first one of these co-ops in Canberra, and we're going through the process now of recruiting the first households. But what there's going to be is there's going to be lots of these local co-ops, because they are, after all, local co-ops. So in the future, there'll be sort of one in every town or one in every suburb. And each one of those co-ops, with lots of households as members individually, each one of those co-ops will own pre-power, because it's a consumer-owned co-op. All the houses own their local co-op, all the local co-ops own pre-power. But these techniques that we're using are not just applicable to the energy space. We can use these same techniques to do water infrastructure. Actually, the one we'll do next is households, a new way of financing households. It doesn't lock people out the way the current system works.
How about milk?
Possibly milk, absolutely. If there's consumers involved, we think they could be involved. And then each one of these sort of sector-based co-ops, because again, it's a consumer co-op, it's a bit fractal in its design, each one of them is going to own the IT services provider. So that's a massive deep dive into, no, it's not a deep dive, it's showing you the complexity without explaining it all, but you know, there's a bit of a show of what pre-power is about. Now, those bookmarks are put in place. Cool. Those bookmarks are put in place. At the moment, it feels like there's a bit of a land grab going on. This whole peer-to-peer energy trading, virtual power plants, demand response place is hugely crowded. There's so many existing big energy companies and new startup energy companies all bundling in, trying to sign up as many households as possible. It's not a land grab, it's a roof grab. And we think we know what's going on. They're trying to own the customers so that they can extract the value out of those customers. And so we're perhaps ill-advised entering that space, but we're doing it anyway. And our key point of difference is that we're placing the consumer as the prime beneficiary of our business model, not shareholders. And we believe that if consumers bandy together and cooperate, that they can actually be a counter to all of those bad behaviours in the corporate world. So that's kind of what we were doing. That was one bookmark. What was the second bookmark?
That's how you think you evolve the retail.
Oh, right. So I think there's a really interesting question. When this becomes really successful, and we've got dozens of local energy co-ops, each with like 100 to 300 households. Let's imagine we've got 1,000 households in the ecosystem. We're selling energy to households. Well, what do we do like at that point in time? Do we continue to partner with retailers that we sort of know and trust? Or do we start to ask the question as to whether or not we can buy those retailers or change the way they operate? And if we're not happy with that, do we form our own retailer? So that's long distance in the future.
It's a possibility.
And it's hard to see how it's going to play out, but it might be a
And I'm
possibility.
thinking, for example, finance. I mean, that's been a long-trusted model, but there are community-owned financial institutions which argue that they have an alternative to the big banks.
Yep.
Because you own, you've got direct connection.
Yeah, cool. So one question on this one, and then I'm going to move on to the last piece.
My question about the pre-power co-ops, how different of an experience is that going to be for your customer? You know, like you get the same bill, how does it look? How does it work?
Yeah, look, we fundamentally believe that most electricity customers in Australia, they don't want to be actively involved in their own energy supplies. So as much as possible, we're not trying to change their current experience. The current experience is they just want to pay their bill. They want it to be the type of product they want at the price they want. We think there's going to be an opportunity here to have a much more social experience about finding out about this new way of buying energy and then participating in owning the energy. Or put it another way, I reckon if you ask most people in Sydney, would you like to know your neighbours more? Most people would probably say no. Yet, if you were to wave a magic wand and you could let people know their neighbours more, if you were to then ask them afterwards, was that a good experience? They'd probably all say yes. We think we don't want to know our neighbours more, but in reality, we actually are social beings. And so we probably try and take those sorts of ethos. It's going to be a very social system, tapping into existing social networks. We'll wait till the end. All right, so I'm going to play, this is the last one, which is the second last one in the earlier list, First Nations Solar. So what are we doing with First Nations renewables? Well, we've been working with the Valley Centre, who have been going out and, on invitation, going and talking to Indigenous communities about the challenges they face around prices and autonomy and self-control. And what the Valley Centre have been uncovering is that overwhelmingly what these Indigenous households want to do is they want to install solar. And that's no surprise, they're Australians, so why wouldn't they? All Australians love the idea of putting solar pretty much. But unfortunately, very few of those communities that the Valley Centre have spoken to have gone ahead and done solar. And we believe that one of the fundamental reasons for that is because they can't afford to install solar. Then when they try and borrow money or access some sort of a financing product, they fail on a credit check. There's been multiple attempts to try and solve this problem, and we think that we can play a significant role in coming up with a solution. It's twofold. First of all, what we want to do is to tell the story of positive change that installing solar on one of these households will make. And we want to tell that story because we believe there are people out there who have it within their power to offer the sort of finance products these communities need. They're just not adequately motivated to do it. And the second thing we're doing is we're leading with an example of how a financial product like this could actually be delivered. So we're starting to create a no-interest fund that will give no-interest loans into communities to install solar. So it's this idea of a revolving fund. So I'm going to show you the video. It lasts about 4 minutes, and that's probably going to take me up to the end of my talk. Okay, might run a couple of minutes over. So this is a video that we've told with support from, been able to tell with support from Bank Australia. And hopefully...
Brewarrina is a very special little community, and it's a beautiful place. People do care for one another, and I believe it's a fair way in front of a lot of other communities. Our little town rising above. But energy costs rose to an extent that people couldn't pay their bills. You feel terrible inside because you can't give your family or your children what they really need because you're trying to keep a light on in the house.
So here we're seeing a solar system go onto Uncle Ikey's roof, and it will see his quarterly power bill drop so significantly. And it is a great feeling.
Power's pretty dear these days. So for solar panels to be installed in Brewarrina, hopefully on a regular basis, will be a great thing for Brewarrina and Aboriginal people. Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
We're going to be installing about 5 kilowatt of solar panels on the roof and 10 kilowatt hour usable of battery storage, but also just helping Uncle Ikey understand where else he can save on energy in his own usage. He could almost end up with no bill.
The thing is, there's actually a lot of money that's draining out of this community, which means if we can keep it in the community, there's a lot of money that we can do really interesting things with. So, unsurprisingly, what Australians choose to do is they choose to take advantage of all the sunshine that's falling all around them.
Common sense, tell you. We probably have no less than 5 days covered with cloud a year, and the rest is all sun. So, Joe, the blind man can see that solar power would be the way to go, you know, and I just can't wait to see the next power bill.
In rural communities like Brewarrina, there's a high percentage of unemployed people, and I think bringing something like this solar to Brewarrina and to the surrounding communities would just be, fantastic, and a lot of people out here would put their hand up to have a go.
What really excites me about this is we're starting here with this house, then we can pretty quickly install solar on the remaining households in this community, and then literally see a rollout of solar starting from communities really in need, living in a solar wonderland. Let's get every house on solar.
What I'm most excited about today was to get everyone in the room as a follow-up to what could be a solution here. And it's called a rolling fund. It's an odd name, rolling, but the funds roll out and then they roll back in, and then that idea seeds the concept for other communities.
The idea of the rolling fund means that each household pays a small amount for their energy. That money comes back and then gets recycled onto new projects. So $1 given is not just sunk in one community, but it's actually used again and again and again in more communities.
In doing all this work, we have hundreds of communities across the country, First Nations communities desperately needing renewable energy. And we got to meet with David Suzuki for the third time. And he said, you've got to get a rolling fund happening, a zero interest rolling fund, and it's got to get happening. Well, 12 months later, and with our connection with PwC and all our wonderful funding bodies, here it is.
Your program will see huge benefits to the Indigenous communities that are able to get these panels installed without having to pay a huge price. And by example, show the people living in the cities and everywhere else, look what you can do.
I want to see all the Indigenous people who live in these little country areas, who struggle with power, to have cheap power, Don't let it be a burden to them, or, let them live and enjoy life.
We haven't got the first bill back from Nockolds, but we're hoping too soon. Solar analytics is installed and it's not actually looked up correctly yet, so we can't even see that data yet. But look, we all know what the result's going to be. It's going to be much less energy being purchased off the retailer, off the grid. And if we can combine that with the idea of the local energy company, actually the local energy co-op, what we can do is we can stop that money from leaving that community, and we can keep it locally. And when we keep that money in the local community, we can do really interesting things with it. Like we can pay local people to do the maintenance. We can pay local people to do energy efficiency programs. And when you pay local people in a community like Brewarrina and the satellite community of Barwon Fall, where Uncle Ikey's from, which is even poorer than the relatively poor town of Brewarrina, when you can pay people in those communities, it is really transformative. So we're going through the process now of seeking funding. In fact, let me just sort of wrap things up. Where to next? I've run through over my fully allotted time the fact that we started out by doing solar for business. We came to a realisation that we had this big brand profile and reputation that we really felt we needed to do justice to. And we expanded our initiatives out into these sort of 4 other areas. The only way we were able to do that is because some of us have stepped up and dramatically increased our volunteer effort. So there's 2 full-time volunteers completely unpaid for the last 6 to 9 months, plus a bunch of other volunteers have been stepping up. We've gotten these initiatives, particularly the Solar Gardens and the Pre-Power initiative, and really this First Nations one is going to be delivered through Pre-Power as well. We've got those 2 initiatives now to the point where it's very clear how to implement them and what benefit they're going to give, but the only way we can possibly move forward with them now is with some funding support. So we're at a crossroads right now. We can't really go on with this expanded ambition forever. We actually need to draw a line under it. So that's where Pingala is up to, and that's the end of my talk. I'll happily stay for as long as you want to answer any questions.
I think we've got time for 2 quick questions. Tom will be around afterwards, and please, we've got lots of snacks, so please hang around for those. We've got an extra half an hour on you.
Now, for those of you that want to sign up to our mailing list, I'm just going to pass the iPad around. Please pass it around the room, and anybody that wants to sign up can do that while we do the question. Who else has a question? Okay.
The bookmark by that because fully explored with virtual power plants. The way you were talking about the pre-power cooperatives, where you have the local areas, like starting in Canberra. So could that be a model where eventually that would be a virtual power plant managed through co-op, and then literally you pay for, if there's a really, at the household level, a big battery, but they're also very efficient in their energy usage, they could be getting a lot more return because they're distributing power to the rest of the people in the co-op.
Correct, that's right. So we see all of that stuff in the future, participating in virtual power plants and more active ways of being involved in energy than just being a take what's given to you consumer. But we also just need to start with something which is achievable and relatively simple. And the achievable and relatively simple thing is get the first suburb in Canberra with 20 households and get them to fund the installation of solar and batteries on their own households as a collective. When we do that, then we can prove the model and we can expand it. And when we've then got a certain size of ecosystem, we've really got lots of power. Consumers can decide what they want to do about participating in a virtual power plant. And I just wonder, are they going to decide to negotiate a better deal as participants in the existing virtual power plant, or are they going to decide to make their own? Because actually it's not that hard, these things. They're not technologically actually not that difficult. Yes, what was your question? Yeah, who else had a question?
Yeah, most people who talk about solar energy refer to solar panels or rooftop solar panels, which I think is a mistake, unfortunate mistake, because just because you don't have a sunny roof doesn't mean that you can't have solar panels. I have trees shading my roof, but then I have sunny areas on my site. Solar panels. So I think it's excluding a lot of people who think in terms of a sunny roof.
They're just too blinkered about your
Exactly,
sunny roof. Yeah.
exactly. Almost every reference I've heard to solar panels, whether it's on the news or people promoting it, they always say rooftop solar panels.
Sure. Is that have you got a question, or is that just a
comment?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I couldn't agree more.
Well, I will add something further. You said you were looking for some sort of term for the Pingala, for promoting it, and you've used fair energy, which I think is great, but I think more important is owning your own energy. If that term could be in some very catchy phrase, it would be good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I'd like to
thanks for staying awake.
I think we've got a real sense of things are changing in the energy space, and I think being in Energy Lab this year has also shown that. And I think there's been a wonderful kind of return to how I started the year with actually acknowledging the traditional owners of the country that we're in. And Warorna is now going to take on the mantle, it seems, as having the longest habitable or habited or whatever the word is, town in, on this planet. And the fish traps is probably one of the oldest structures that we know of made by humans. So it's fantastic to see how all of these things are actually starting to link together and what they mean for communities. So I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you at our Christmas party, and please as well have a look at our AGM and consider becoming involved with our community. If not, we look forward to seeing you. We're always away in December and January, but we'll be back every next year. Thanks very much.